that Dogwood Men's Retreat, the last weekend of March. I guess you could talk to Ricky about signing up online. He's in charge of that, so we'll welcome all of the guys. I am an alcoholic. My name is Gary Kincaid. And I am really, 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 really grateful for a sobriety date and a new life. Started July 25th of '94. Chris, welcome. Welcome to all of you. And I introduced myself that way because if all I had was a sobriety date and the same old life, I wouldn't have the sobriety date, I can tell you that. This thing is as much, if not more, about having a new life than it is about just not drinking. Now then, I had the promises read for the purpose of sharing with you that one of the things I've experienced over the years, being around a lot of AA meetings and a lot of people around AA, is how many people try to work the promises and hope the steps come true. I cannot tell you how many people I've heard that said, all those promises are coming true, and they hadn't done a damn thing yet. I really see them on page 152, where it says they're like the little boy whistling in the dark. Inside, they'd give anything to have a drink or two and get away with it. Saying, life's better, love it, everything's fine, everything's great. So we see those people leave and come back and finally get inside the group that's inside the group. That's a good deal. I'm glad you mentioned that Walter said that, because I knew you could have come up with that. So I want to use to get started, and believe it or not, we're going to get 3 through 9 done tonight. I want to read the promises in a way that everybody in this room who is an alcoholic can understand, whether you've done the work or not. Before I was halfway through a bottle of whiskey, I was amazed. I knew a new happiness and a new freedom. Before I was halfway through a bottle of whiskey, I did not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. I comprehended the word serenity, and I knew peace. No matter how far down the scale I'd gone, before I was halfway through that bottle, I could see how my experience could benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity would start to disappear. Our whole attitude and outlook on life disappeared about halfway through that bottle. I intuitively knew how to handle situations which used to baffle me. They caused a lot of consequences later, but I intuitively knew at the time. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They were being fulfilled among y'all all the time. Every bottle or every case of beer held that delusion that it was doing something powerful for me. And what I'm going to share about 3 through 9 tonight, if I could not have found something in this program that did for me what alcohol did when alcohol worked, I'd be back to drinking alcohol again. Just not drinking and going to meetings is not a program of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a good starting place, but a lot of people start and they never complete because of what we're going to talk about tonight. So a quick rehash, and I mean quick, on step one. It's a two-parter. I'm going to read this. Now, listen to how he writes it. This is going to come up twice tonight. And this is page 44 in your book. In the preceding chapters, you've learned something about alcoholism. Now, what does that infer? That I've read the preceding chapters. A lot of information that gets shared in meetings is not information that comes out of the preceding chapters. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something about alcoholism. We hope, and when he says we, it's Bill Wilson writing, he's talking about him in the first 100. We hope that we've made clear, where they make it clear,
the distinctions
in the preceding chapters, the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. Now that's pretty important in here. If you're new and you haven't gotten into these steps, or if you've been here for a while and you tend to forget about them, that distinction never leaves. And here it is. It has nothing to do with DWIs, or going to jail, or getting divorced, or getting fired. Has nothing to do with that. It's two things. If when you honestly want to, you find you can't quit entirely. Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you drink, you're probably an alcoholic. That's it. And we call that second part the allergy of the body, meaning once I start to drink, now it doesn't mean if I leave here tonight and try to test it and I go buy me a can of beer and I sip it, it doesn't mean I'm going to start foaming at the mouth and have some more. But it means once I get started drinking, for the only reason, I cannot tell you how many times people will tell me why they became alcoholics. It was that second divorce and I was real lonely. I got fired from that job I always wanted. It has nothing to do with that. The only reason an alcoholic drinks is for the effect produced by a few drinks. The effect, that's it. And the effect can be different. I shared with y'all many times the effect for me. I could walk into a club. There could be this many of you women in that club seated at tables by yourself. I've not had anything to drink, and I cannot walk across the room and ask you to dance. I just can't do it. Pretty sure everybody's going to be watching. If you tell me no, I'm going to have to book it. And I can't dance. Now you give me about 4 shots of whiskey, I start looking for a woman sitting with her husband and 4 brothers. And I can dance. Now that's an effect. You have to, hopefully out of reading the doctor's opinion through the first 3 chapters, find your effect. Some of you had trauma so deep that it lets you just blot it out. It let others dream dreams. It let others feel like they fit in. But in the beginning, when it worked, it was a powerful, powerful effect. And I call it was my first spiritual experience. I didn't name it that, but that was the experience. So who in the hell wouldn't keep drinking? Finally found something that worked. Now that's part one of step one. Part two gets described in pretty good detail 3 times in this book. And our lives were unmanageable. The first description is unmanageable light. Bill lets the doctor do it. Restless, irritable, and discontented. Not when I'm drinking, when I'm not drinking. I'm sober and restless, irritable, and discontented, unless I can at once have the ease and comfort that comes from a few drinks. You know, Bill's going to describe it, I call this medium or even heavy. It's on page 52. This is part of unmanageable. Again, it has nothing to do with money and divorces and going to jail or any of that stuff. I'm not drinking. I'm physically sober. I'm having trouble with personal relationships. I couldn't control my emotional nature. I was a prey to misery and depression. Had a feeling of uselessness, was full of fear. I was unhappy. I couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That is a clear description of, and my life was unmanageable. Now he gives the really heavy one, the extreme unmanageability, in chapter 11. Page 151. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, becoming ever blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding companionship and approval. Momentarily, we did. Then would come oblivion, an awakening. And when I awake, I'm not drinking. And here's the true description of unmanageability: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. So there's our step one. Me sharing it's not going to do a lot for you if you don't sit down and read the preceding chapters. Step two, easiest step in the book. I'm going to let y'all all take it right here, right now. Is there anybody in the audience that has ever come to your first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? Is there anybody who walked into that meeting not believing in God? Okay, that's only about 3 out of the whole crew, 4. So we got most of you walked in the door already saying you believed in God. And of the others, there might be necessity to read the 4th chapter. The chapter of We Agnostics. But if you walk in here and you already believe, you can skip it right now. And for the other 4, he's going to write in that chapter, as soon as you believe or become willing to believe, You're on your way. And all of you that have gone to a lot of meetings have heard it said so many times it's almost sickening. It kills people. Well, my sponsors got me working on step 1 for the first month. The sponsors don't work on step 1. Alcohol, 12 steps is in here. Well, they want me to write about what kind of God I want to have. Find that in the book. It ain't there. It's a simple question. Do you believe? You don't have to like. Your belief might be in a mean, nasty kind of God. It doesn't matter right now. I'm going to share with you, I have never met an alcoholic, and I've met a bunch of them, that has any problems with God. I've never met an alcoholic that did not have a problem with their thinking about God. Big difference. And if you've read the preceding chapters, you have been told what, starting at about page 25, the rest of the book is about. That the main problem of the alcoholic lies in our mind, our thinking. So why do I want to take a newcomer and work with him until he comes up with a good thought about God? Because the thinking's not going to change without the action that follows. And Bill writes about that. Any of y'all ever read how it works in your meetings? Some good stuff in there. I promise you, y'all know I could probably do this on anything. I could do 5 weeks on how it works. It's powerful stuff. I always suggest to people when you're chairing the meeting, don't hand how it works to somebody brand new. Give how it works to somebody that has experienced how it works, so that some of the conviction of that can come through in the reading. But he's got a question down here. And again, it's page 60. Our description of the alcoholic. You ever hear that? That's the doctor's opinion and the first 3 chapters. That's our description of the alcoholic. It helps if I have read our description of the alcoholic. The chapter to the agnostic. That's chapter 4. And I love this one, our personal adventures before what? Before our dry day. And this is powerful. This is for you people that have been here and think you got this program down. And after. My personal adventures after July the 25th of 1994 have convinced me more than my adventures before that date that I am an alcoholic. Because all the behaviors that I used to blame on the alcohol, the kid has done them sober. That's a hard news for new people. I mean, your whole damn life, what you think you've heard is, if you just won't drink, everything's gonna be okay. It's not true. Our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. Step 1. That God could and would if sought. Step 2. So when you're at this point, you're ready for what he says next. Being convinced of what? A, B, and C. Not being convinced I'm going to lose my husband, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to go to jail, I'm not going to go to jail, my kids are never going to speak to me again, I'll get my kids back. None of that. Being convinced of the ABCs, we're now at step 3. How many times have I heard in meetings, well, I'm having a lot of trouble with step 3. I just don't know if I'm ready to do step 3 yet. I think I'd just rather keep this active spiritual cancer that's eating away at my life inside me for a lot longer until I decide. We're now at step 3. Again, I love meetings. My experience was that I didn't talk much early on. I was afraid I'd say something stupid. I'm no longer afraid of that. I say something stupid all the time. But we had a meeting at Suburban. The topic was step 3. I'm sitting with my sponsor. And for some reason I said, I'm an alcoholic, my name's Gary, blah, blah, blah. And what I think step 3 means, and Jerry leaned over and said, pass. Now it felt like he stood up and said, you dumb SOB, shut the hell up. He didn't do that, but it felt that way. He was very courteous and just said, pass. And afterwards, I'm like, he said, let's read this. Being convinced, we were at step 3, which is, we decided to turn our will. Now, if you've read the preceding chapters, you've gotten some of that old religious ideas about God's will and your will out of your mind. And you've begun to understand that when he's using the word here, will means thinking. I'm making a decision to turn my thinking and my life, and life is nothing but the most important word in recovery, my actions. I'm going to turn my thinking and my actions about my alcoholism, not alcohol. If you're in here, you don't have the illness of alcohol, you have the illness of alcoholism. I'm going to make the decision to turn this over to God as I understand it. And even if all I understand is what the early AA said, many of you have read that history book called Not God. I believe it's the best history of AA that's available. And it's titled that because, as the author says, the early AAs simply said to people, there is a God and you're not God. It's about that simple. And here's the key word that'll let us breeze right on through in 25 minutes to step 9. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? And Jerry said, Gary, why in the hell do I care what you think about it? You've got 3 pages here of Bill writing about what step 3 means and what we do about it. Now, do you remember over on page 18? No, excuse me, 20. Doubtless you're curious. Now, many of you have already asked yourself, why is it that we all became so very ill from drinking? Now, if you read that on page 20, you might note that he doesn't answer the question. Well, he begins to answer it here on page 61. Any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like the actor playing the director. And if this doesn't nail everybody in the room, then you don't belong in the Al-Anon family group and you don't belong in AA. Because by now, we ain't talking about alcohol anymore. We're talking about living by self-propulsion. We're like the actor wanting to arrange the stage, the lights, the scene, all the players. We got it all. If Ricky and Todd would just do what I'd want them to do, the ducks would stay in a row. And when the ducks start scattering, damn them. And we just chase the ducks a little harder and try to get them in a row again. And while we're doing that, we're doing the two things most common to bring about restless, irritable, and discontented. The two things that will most often make us a prey to misery and depression, to be full of fear. The two things that will eventually bring about again terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. And these are not two things that are only for people who are starting brand new. This is for all of us. Those two activities are complaining and blaming. Now that sounds like a hard thing to get away from, doesn't it? Complaining and blaming. Now I know most of you in this room, and I know most of y'all don't do this anymore, but you know a bunch of people that do. He gives some examples. Here's one that doesn't go on at all anymore with anybody in AA. He's like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine, complaining of the sad state of the nation. Now that never happens anymore with any of y'all, does it?
No.
The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century, now 21st. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. Complaining and blaming leads to being restless, irritable, and discontented. It leads to the hardest drug that any alcoholic will ever have to get over. It's the most powerful drug that I know of. If there was some way to bottle it, it would put liquor stores and pot dispensaries and crack dealers out of business. If we could somehow put self-pity in a little bottle where we could just get a hit of it when we wanted it. There is nothing more powerful than the self-pity that comes when I am a victim and nobody understands and they're not acting right. So I got to do something to make them act right. And most of the time I don't want to do anything, I just want to bitch. And that's a good activity because there's a big fellowship out there. Whenever you and I walked into these rooms, we walk in with a lot of baggage. We've got stuff inside us that we've been carrying sometimes our entire life. Some of those things we've been carrying long before we ever took a drink. And if I can't find some way to get rid of that stuff, I'm never going to get to the real ninth step promises, and I'm not going to get sober. He describes some of those which is hard for us to see in the beginning, and this is for all of us. But it again is on page 18. This is part of what makes step 3 and moving on quickly so important. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him. No one's angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes the annihilation of all things in life worthwhile. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives, husbands, parents. Anyone can increase the list. If you've been reading the book and you're getting to this point, one of the things that is starting to disappear, at least it did in me, is one of the things that has to disappear, and that's me being a victim. Victims will not get recovery. And in no way are we not saying, certainly some of you suffered abuse and victimization at the hands of others. But I've got to do something about that so I don't remain a victim. And we'll talk mainly about that in the 12th step. But we get a start of it here. So we're doing the third step prayer. First action in the book. The first action of the recovery is getting on my knees, hopefully with an understanding person, and taking this prayer. And I don't even have to believe that I believe in God. It's not about believing in God, it's about believing that prayer is an action. And if I take the actions, God proves God to me. I don't prove God to me and then take the actions. And we take that third step, and he gives a horrible word. This terrible word for today's, well, I don't want to say today's AA, that makes me sound like a complaining, but I hear it a lot in meetings. You sure won't take your time with this stuff. You better know what you're doing before you do it. That's kind of like, again, finding out that I've got cancer and saying to the doctor, no, wait, I'm going to spend about a year researching this stuff before I have the surgery. We take the step, and it says next. Anybody got a dictionary? Most of us don't need to know what next is defined as in the book. It means next. We do the inventory. I hope everybody in this room gets the opportunity to do a big book inventory. Not something you've gotten off the internet, or something from the treatment center, or something that your therapist is going over with you. Do a big book inventory. And it's a place where we really need the help of someone who's already taken one. Because it's so simple, it's just almost ununderstandable. But all that stuff we brought in here with us, the pain, and there's a lot of pain in any meeting of AA. There's a lot of heartbreak. There's a tremendous amount of fear of what's going to happen. And you're getting to a point, if you're new here, or if you've been here for a while and you've gone on by this point, all we have to do is become willing to be changed. and have nothing to do with the change. Now, why am I going to do that? Frustration, terror, bewilderment, and despair. Why am I going to do that? Because there's nothing left for me to do except keep drinking and go on to the bitter end. That's going to be the motivation to say, I'm willing to have anything except what has me now. And make no mistake about it, no one ever came into one of our meetings looking for what we have. How in the hell can we know what we have until we have it? We come in here trying to get away from what has us. And hopefully we're coming in and meeting some of the people that are in the fellowship that's within the fellowship. People that are grateful to no longer be who they used to be. And I share this with the people who've been here for a while, and I mean it. Step 3 is not a take step. It's not a took step. It's a take step. I am forever taking step 3. It's not something, I took step 3 back there before I did my inventory. It's a daily take step. Now, y'all don't think we're going to get to 9, but we are. Because I trust this book. Resentments is part of the inventory. I'll just say this. Within the last year, I've had a person come to me and said they were ready to do a 5th step. Now, they hadn't worked with me of doing the 4th step. And they came to me and they had something that was about 70 pages long. And I said, let me see that, and I dropped it in the trash can. I cannot think of a reason in the world why an inventory would be more than 10 or 12 pages long, if that. I call alcoholism spiritual constipation. We have things in us that we can't pass. And we've been spending our life looking for something out there to add to us, to make us comfortable in our own skin. Another relationship, a better job, more money, joining the gym, blah, blah, blah. Something out there, out there, out there. And please hear this in the way I'm saying it, and the book talks about it. That includes church. Because most of the people I meet have tried church before they try AA. And they're looking for something that will happen to them, that will change them immediately or automatically without any action on their part. This is not about adding to, it's about having things removed. It's about discovering out of our 3rd step, and please hear this out of the book and my experience. No alcoholic needs more God. Many have sought more God while drinking. What you and I need is defined in step 3 is I need less me. If I can find some way to get me out of the way, all that's left is God. So spiritual growth in our program is addition by subtraction. And the book says the main things that are blocking me, this constipation, are resentments. So I've got to do a resentment inventory. Fear. Many of you are like me, I'm not afraid of anything. And I started doing that inventory with my sponsor and found out I've been eat up with fear since I was 4 years old. I've been acting out of fear my whole life. And then there's the sex inventory. Now I always say here, giving new people hope, this is not Celibacy Anonymous. But we all need an overhauling on our sex conduct over the years, whether it's been with people or the imaginatory sex conduct. We've got a real simple inventory to take care of those things. I get in my word, there's no place in the book where it says I put me on my resentment list. We'll call that self-pity. It takes care of that too. But just try taking the inventory. And you hadn't done a whole lot when you take the inventory. Except take the inventory. 4 through 9 is really one step. And if I am not willing to start at 4 and finish with 9, the rest of it is a waste of time in my experience. It does say you've swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself just from doing the writing. But you got to go share it with somebody. And when I shared it, I found out that a lot of stuff that I thought was true wasn't. The inventory taken without sharing it with someone is a very subjective experience. And I need an objective look at those things. Page 72 tells us why we're doing this. And I think this gets lost very often. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? And here's the whole key to the whole thing. We have been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator. You got 71 pages of instructions here, and it tells us all we've been doing here. It's not get my marriage back, it's not get a job, it's not get out of jail, it's to get a new attitude and a new relationship with my Creator. And, big and, to discover the obstacles in my path. What are the obstacles? Resentments, fears, or conduct that has harmed others. I can no longer say, let's just call it all even, let bygones be bygones. We're going to let's start with a clean slate. I think the Christian version of that, and I use some of these examples because they say things better than I can, not because I'm Christian or I'm pushing the church. But you can't put new wine in old wineskins. There's got to be a whole change. And having nothing to do with the change. If you're going to get a new life, the old one's got to be discarded. So we sit down and we start a process of sharing with our sponsors. And then we go home and we're looking at 6 and 7 when we get home, shortcomings. Most of us know everything there is to know about defects of character and shortcomings. Because most of our drinking careers, when we got together at the bar with people or when we were getting high with people, we sat around and talked about our defects of character. Every once in a while we get on the topic of humility or being of service to others. You've got your defects of character already outlined. I'm not one of those. This is for me. You have to realize I'm not speaking for AA. I'm speaking from my experience in AA. I don't look at the on the beam, off the beam. I don't look at the 7 deadly sins. I don't look at the list of 40 defects of character. Bill lays them out pretty plainly on page 67, where we've been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. Now maybe some of you are so pure or will become that way where you can grow beyond 4 defects of character. I ain't got there yet. Those 4, yeah, I'll keep coming back. Those 4 continue, and we'll look at that in step 10 next week. Bill says we just continue to look for those. But I've got a little secret thing I do on 6 and 7. I got to this point and found out I never had any morality in my life. I didn't believe much in sin. I just didn't have any morals. Except don't get caught. So it came to me, here's what you've been doing, people. The moment you walked into your first meeting, you started doing a spiritual task that probably you've never done before, and that's you started becoming transparent. That's hard for us. And when you do 4 and 5, that's really opening that window of transparency. You're letting someone else see things that you didn't even want to look at. Now I get to 6 and 7 and I determine I don't want to be that way anymore. And I found out I cannot work on my defects of character. There's nothing in the book that says we can, but I can show my higher power demonstrations of willingness to be changed. And one of those for me is I've got to quit secrets. I don't care if you do internet sex or internet porn or internet gambling. We don't care what you do in AA. But if you're doing that stuff, just put the computer on the kitchen table where your spouse and kids can see what you're doing. Because it's not the action that's going to kill us, it's the secret. Because when I have secrets, I have no intimacy. And I'm alone again. And the word loneliness is the word used most in our book to describe alcoholism. And that's when terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair come alive again. Well, I'll take a look at those, and right away, we come to step 8. Don't go burning your inventory. The book says, referring back to our inventory. We've got a beginning on the 8th step, where I'm going to write down those blameless children, those disgusted parents, those disgusted, resentful employers, those people I owe money to, those people that I have harmed in my life, leaving the others out of the way totally. Because until I finish that amends, I'm not going to be cleansed of this spiritual constipation. And the book is going to tell us 3 times that we're liable to drink again. 1 is if we fail to do the inventory. 2 is if our sex conduct continues to harm people and we continue to do it. And 3 is if we are afraid to face our creditors. And I could talk a lot longer than I've got left at people in the last few years that have come to me with more sobriety than I have, telling me that their life is going to pieces again and they need something more. They're just not getting it in AA. And I'll ask them, where do you stand on your original 9th step amends? And the huge majority of them have never completed their amends, particularly their financial, and they've still got those 2 categories of people that you and I cannot live at peace with if we have them in our life. Bitches and some bitches. That's called a resentment. So I got to find some way to get rid of, and I'll end with this tonight, the 2 phrases that we've got great instructions. The 2 phrases that you and I cannot live at peace if we have these phrases in our life. And one of those is to me. How could they do that to me? And we can stand out on the front porch and talk about that ex or the in-laws or the president or you can name it. They're doing that to me. And the other one I couldn't live with was to them. How could I have done that to my kids? Now, it's not going to be quick like that before we're halfway through the bottle. The book says a long period of reconstruction lies before us. But I can tell you this from my experience. The moment you decide to go through with the process, and the moment you get to making those amends, you will begin to know a new freedom and a new happiness, which there was no way you could know what it felt like until you have it. And you're going to know a new relationship with a higher power that words take away from. Does anyone in here have children or nieces or grandchildren? I love children. But there's something about hugging a child and hugging my child that words cannot comprehend. It is only comprehended as an experience. And we're begging you, Bill says, with all the earnestness and thoroughness, we beg of you to quit trying to learn recovery and to get started experiencing a recovery that words can only take away from. And we'll do 10 and 11 next week. Thank you.